Welcome to IJDM. So, what is with this giant video cassette? I mean, this is the size of my hand, and you can see it is pretty big. And what is up with this? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But first, we're going to go through a few different stages of development through all these formats and what they were. Some of these were 3/4, some of them were 1/2 inch, some of them were smaller. It just depends on the format and what it is. I'm not going to get into dimensions and real technical, just kind of the era they came from and what they were used for. Of course, it all started off pretty much with the Sony beta tape. Notice I don't say betamax, because that's kind of like saying video high-res system. Nobody says that. It's just, it was either beta or beta SP, period, in my book. And everybody thinks this was a failed format, but I'll get back to it. These were solid tapes, solid machines. I mean, most of the engineering came from Sony when they actually cared about their products, and they were just great. I mean, nice plastic cases, and this is actually a more modern case and an older tape. I actually have somewhere, I have a beta tape that's actually a little bit nicer. This format did survive till it pretty much died out around 84, 85, 86, depending where you lived and what country, but it pretty much survived into probably the mid-90s before it totally disappeared off the shelves and you couldn't find the tapes anywhere, and it pretty much became a useless format by then. And by that time, we were starting to get into the DVD era. But it had 2 or 3 incarnations, the first one being the beta, the original beta, or what people sometimes refer to as betamax. And then toward the roughly mid 80s, they went into a newer version called super beta, which offered stereo sound and higher quality video. And it did look good. It was my preferred format. The tapes were all solid. I mean, this is just a standard beta tape, and it's just solid. I mean, it's built like a brick. You can make a foundation for your house out of these tapes. But that's pretty much covering the beta format for now, because everybody thought this pretty much exited the window in the 80s, mid 80s, but it really didn't. It actually survived in another way that most people don't realize actually did. And our next format we're going to go into is, oh god, VHS. Don't get me started on this. It came in a couple different ones. I think there was VHS and then s-vhs, and then eventually I think there was like a digital VHS. Tapes were very, I mean, they're just, man, the quality of this. I mean, I've never been sold. I just kept these tapes around because it was kind of cool. When companies did care, they gave you this nice casing and plastic thing to store them in rather than the cardboard they use later on. And I was just going to show this tape. This was bad on my part. Back in the day, I recorded over it, but this was obviously the Hunt for Red October that came in the red tape, which is probably ultra rare now. And if you had this sleeve, it probably would sell for like whatever on one of the auction sites. But yeah, that's done is done. But still, it's a red tape, and it's pretty cool because you don't see these very often, and I just hung on to it because of that reason. And that kind of covers the home format, the main 2 that were around. There was another one I'm aware of that was the Video 2000 or whatever, but we won't get into that because it wasn't really big in the US. Some companies made, mainly for kids and smaller things, they did make, and this is just a quick mention, they did make cassette tapes that actually would store video, but they were absolutely horrid. I mean, about as bad as those Sony Mavica videos that I did, probably even worse than that, but I thought I'd just do a quick mention on that. And as things progressed, and originally this was supposed to take over beta before the wars even started and take over VHS, but this is the Video 8 format, also known as High 8. I believe it later came out in digital. I'm not sure if High 8 is digital or not. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I'm a little fuzzy on some details. I don't look up again, I don't script anything I do here, obviously. That should show. But these were nice tapes, and they kind of set the stage going forward for what digital tapes would be going into the future. They're small, they're compact, they did have pre-recorded ones. Some news agencies did use these, which I'll get to back to that in a moment, along with the beta. Then we had DVC minidv, which came out about the same time as these 2 formats. Some stations used them for like certain types of cameras that they didn't want to bring the expensive ones in. They could bring the minidv camera out, and it recorded okay. It wasn't a spectacular format, but to me it was still better than this. getting into this was Panasonic's basic reaction to Sony's dvcam tape, which was the new predecessor to these older formats, which I'm going to go back to in a second. But these were pretty much around, I would say mid-90s till, I mean, well into the 2000s that they used it. Sony made the dvcam tape, and then obviously Panasonic followed suit, and because it was cheaper and so forth, most people, if you worked at a smaller station, odds are use this or use some type of 8mm digital tape or whatever. And I did work at a few places that I did encounter these over the air. And again, the lid mechanism is kind of the same as what I pointed out on the earlier 8mm format, which this is what they would use. There was those two, and then maybe earlier on they would use this 8mm format, which is the Pro version, which uses the metal tapes and has the high 8 quality on them. I don't know if I'll ever use this tape or not. I do have that one high 8 camera I featured a while back there, which I'm having some issues with it right now. It's just a very temperamental camera. But yeah, it's kind of cool because this resembles this. So it kind of went digital. Now we're going to rewind a little bit. And I said originally that Beta pretty much exited the market consumer-wise, but broadcast and professional-wise, it stuck around, and it hung in there in the form of Betacam. And the original one would have just been Betacam. That's it. And then later Betacam SP, and I believe the big difference was the tapes went to metal and the quality got better. And then later on, which usually came in like yellow cases, was the digital Betacam. If you were one of those places that really did high-end stuff, that's probably what you'd use, and may even still be around today. And this came in two flavors, basically. It came in what I'm used to, which I was one of the people that was usually out in the field recording shows and so forth. You would use the 30-minute ones that would fit into the Sony professional camcorders. And this is what the tapes look like. I mean, they actually are, and I'll point this out, are just almost exactly the same. In fact, on most players you can actually shove one of these in the home version, but you don't want to do that because the home versions are non-metal, where the professional versions were metal tapes and would absolutely destroy the machine, the heads, particularly from what I've heard over the years. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I seem to remember. So, but if it just said Betacam, then you'd be all right because it didn't have the metal tapes. And so this was your 30-minute tape. Sometimes they'd use these in the stations for recording shorter shows. If you had a longer show, you'd use this big old honking one, which I'm saving for last. What is this big honking tape, and why is it so big? Well, these could only go 30 minutes. There was no record speeds. It's just everything was standard at one speed. So if you wanted more than 30 minutes, you had to go one of these big honking tapes that were just humongous. I mean the size comparison between this and this is, I mean, it's almost 3 times larger. And the decks that use these inside the systems that you would feed them into, and I actually have one where I work, maybe I'll show that in a later video, take some video of it or just show a cutaway of it, but these would actually fit in. And then there was another little mechanism that would allow it to accept these tapes too on most machines. I think there was a few that didn't, but they're pretty much interchangeable. You just couldn't use these obviously in the field cameras. I don't know if there was ever a big format thing, but I believe this came in 60, and then I think that was the max though. I don't think you could ever go to 90. It would involve a tape change at that point during a commercial break or so forth. But these were kind of the things you would see littered around broadcast stations back in the day if you worked at a really good TV station. Smaller stations, like I said, use different formats. And of course, they give you these nice little labels, which I still have. And I guess this one fell out of the DV cam tape. But that's all your formats. Going through a few of them, broadcast and home, pretty much the main ones. There's some others I may have not mentioned and went through, and if I missed one that was, I mean, I am aware of other formats that were out there. I believe there was a Panasonic M2 format, which was a similar tape to the VHS, but was different, and there was a few other oddball ones out, but I just kind of wanted to go through the main ones that I saw in different places that I worked here in the USA. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to subscribe and check out my other videos. We'll see you next time.